Good morning, friends. This is Laura with Potpourri of Life. I hope that you're having a great day. The sun is shining. That is awesome, but it's cold out there. Today, what I want to share with you is a little bit about Christmas. Okay, what I'm talking about is this morning I am going to be making a cookie that I enjoy making every holiday season, and I may make, this might be my only batch, but it might not be. I am going to be making some chocolate crinkles, and I'm sure you can find the recipe online. I just happen to use the recipe from this cookbook that has been passed down, and it's in my possession. Actually, it was given to me from my mother. My granny had bought it, and then my mother stopped using it, so I was gifted with it. So this is a real nice memory, because I used to bake a lot of cookies from this cookbook, and I don't know if you can see up close, but a lot of these things are there's all kinds of stains on these things. And I got little sticky notes for my favorite recipes. But chocolate crinkles is one of my favorite cookies. I do like snickerdoodles, and I do make snickerdoodles a couple of times during this season. And I know I'm an advocate for not eating a lot of sugar. I'm right there. But you know what? Having one or two cookies is not going to hurt you. And this recipe does have sugar. So those of you who need to kick back from having too much sugar, this might not be the recipe for you. Or maybe just have one. And can you stop at one? Yeah, just do your best. You know, just be satisfied with one and hide the rest. So what I'm doing though is I'm going to be making this gluten-free. Not for me. I will probably keep a few, but mostly I'm doing it because I want to gift my daughter and my grandchildren with a gift of cookies. And in doing so, my daughter is gluten and dairy intolerant herself. So I am making this so it's gluten and dairy free. For the most part, it's dairy free. The flour is what I have to change up, and I'm also changing the sugar so that it's not, I'm using organic sugar. So what I've got going on right now is I am melting some dark chocolate, and in it'll get soft. It's in a double boiler, so you got the water on the bottom, and I'm melting this dark chocolate. It won't take long. You can see the steam coming up, that it's warming up and melting. So once that's done, I can put it in a mixture. So I'm going to share how I'm making this, how I'm making it gluten-free, and what you can do if you want it regular. Basically, I'll tell you the regular recipe, and I'll tell you what I'm changing out in order to make it gluten-free. So the first thing is I'm melting the chocolate. The next thing that I'm going to be doing with that is I'll be adding a ½ cup of vegetable oil. You know, use whatever vegetable oil you would like. I am going to use some grapeseed oil today. It's good for baking and it's good for frying. I'm using it for baking. And I need to get my liquid measurer. All right. So it requires ½ cup of vegetable oil. And I'm going to put it in a smaller bowl because it will be mixed in with the chocolate once that's ready. This is actually one of my favorite cookies, and when I make it, I have to make it to share. Otherwise, I will want it. And right now, even though I may steal one or two cookies, I am on a mission not to have much for sugar right now, even during the holiday season. So this is a dark chocolate, has no sugar, so it calls for unsweetened chocolate, 4 ounces. You don't need to have sweetened chocolate, so don't go get your chocolate morsels because you're already going to be putting in sugar. You don't need more than that, and as you know, this is already going to be a pretty sweet treat to begin with. So while that's going, the next thing, oil, chocolate, and granulated sugar. So what I'm going to also put in this bowl is 2 cups, that's a lot of sugar. I'm going to put in 2 cups of organic sugar. don't think you can see this. And then once the chocolate is melted, I am going to be mixing it together. All right. Get that started, and then the warm, soft, melted chocolate will get added in. So the next ingredient in a different bowl will be 2 cups, oops, excuse me. Once the chocolate is in there, I will be adding eggs. But I'm going to put together my dry ingredients right now. I'm going to put 2 cups of gluten-free flour. Mind you, you can use regular flour with this. You don't have to put any of those additives for baking with gluten-free flour because this is not a bread. These are just cookies. So there's 2 cups of gluten-free flour. The other item I'm going to put to this is 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay, the next is I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of salt. This is not iodized salt, and I do not round it up. It's kind of a little bit under a teaspoon of sugar, or half a teaspoon of sugar, salt. I can't talk this morning because I'm not big on adding salt to things, but salt does bring out the flavors of your food. Plus, this is not me pouring tons of salt on a dinner meal. This is just something to add flavor to the cookies. So let's see, I've got those all taken care of. What I'm going to be adding to the side, one thing that we will be adding later is confectionery sugar. So you're going to need confectionery sugar too. Let's see where we're at with, nope, this is not melted yet. It's working its way. Fortunately, I'm able to bend the chocolate squares . What I'm going to start doing now is I am going to start getting my eggs ready. They are going to be added into the chocolate mixture. What I do is I break my eggs separately. I do them one at a time, and the reason is I used to do it with just store-bought, but now that we have our own chickens laying eggs, I still do that just to make sure there's nothing wrong with the egg. You crack an egg open and it smells, you got to get rid of it. For the most part, I haven't had any problems with the chicken eggs. They've been doing great, and they taste fabulous, and they have not been bothering my stomach like other eggs have done in the past. So we're going to need 4 eggs. And so what I do is, okay, I crack them and then I check them. And I think this is almost done. Let me check here. Perfect. I'm going to get this off. Be really careful because this pan, this double boiler pan, will be hot. I know that that's a known fact. You've had the heat on it. But sometimes we get excited and we just touch things and burn ourselves. And it's not because somebody is not paying, well, maybe they're not paying attention, but stuff happens. And I don't know. Okay, so all this chocolate goodness, it's nice and melted, gets added into the other mixture. I like using these scrapers because I can get all the chocolate out of there as best as possible. And this is not, I like plain dark chocolate. I don't need it sweetened, but most people would find this very, very bitter. It's actually quite healthy for you to have dark chocolate versus milk chocolate, but this recipe does not call for milk chocolate. It calls for the dark chocolate, the unsweetened baking chocolate. So I'm mixing this up. This here is your oil, your chocolate, and your sugar. So, and it'll mix in really nice. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to add in 1 egg at a time. So this is my first one that's been broken, and they look beautiful. So that's egg 1. I think I got a piece of the shell in there. I didn't notice it before I pulled it in. There we go. That's 3. I know this is not Sesame Street 1, 2, 3, 4. I remember when I baked with my girls, just counting and stuff like that. And it's just, having your kids in the kitchen is very good for spending time together, teaching them how to bake and fend for themselves, as well as counting and measuring. So even though this is a nice family fun time type of activity, you're teaching your kids as well. But as a grandmother, I just enjoy baking. So it feels good to be baking for them today. And as I've shared in the past, I don't bake as much as I used to. Now you want to mix it in really good so that the eggs are all mixed in really nicely. And you can see that sometimes you'll get more egg in here. And so just keep going. Okay, so in this first bowl, and tell me, does that look delightful? It does, and it has sugar in it, so it actually will taste pretty good. But no, don't go licking the bowl yet. So in this first bowl, we have half a cup of vegetable oil of your choice. 4 squares, or the unsweetened, it's 4 ounces of unsweetened chocolate. Use the dark chocolate. 2 cups of granulated sugar, and then I added in 4 eggs. This is all set for me to start adding in the dry ingredients. But before I do, we are going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. This is Madagascar vanilla that I make, and it's what I put in a lot of my baked goods. And yet the recipe does call for vanilla. It says 2 teaspoons. I'm going to put this in and mix it in first. If you've never put vanilla in your hot chocolate, most especially if you are one who makes homemade hot cocoa, that's something I do. I add in vanilla, and it tastes pretty good. You don't need a lot of sugar to make homemade hot cocoa, because I don't use this kind of chocolate. I use a Belgium dark chocolate, melt it with the milk. All right, I'm going to add in this mixture of 2 cups of gluten-free flour. You can use regular flour. I have 2 teaspoons of baking powder and a half teaspoon of salt. It's not iodized, that's your choosing. What do you have on hand? I just use sea salt with my baking. You can add in, some people add a little bit at a time. Some recipes call for that. I don't, and my book does not. It doesn't call for it. So I just mix this right in. And so we're going to mix this until it is no longer white on top. There is no hurry to get this done. You can mix it in an electric mixer if you want. And I've used my electric mixer a lot, and I got it with the onset of Lyme disease because I just didn't have the energy. But as I work on building up my strength, I prefer to do things manually. But sometimes you'll catch me using my mixer. Okay. A wooden spoon blends much easier. And what's going to happen is once this mixture is done, I'm going to refrigerate it for a few hours before we go to the final step. So when you're mixing this, make sure you get right in there, because oftentimes you will find flour right at the bottom. As you can see, I'm pulling up some flour on the bottom because of the white. You want to make sure you get all that, and you can use a rubber spatula to kind of pull it up if you can't tell that it's all there. And once it's all mixed up, we are going to refrigerate this for a couple of hours, because that's what's going to get this all ready to use for baking. And you can refrigerate it overnight. So say you know that you're going to be baking cookies with the kids or with friends, you can take this and just take this batter, stick it in the refrigerator overnight so you can prepare it ahead of time. Or in my case, I'm just like, today's the day I'm going to make cookies, so I'm going to do this. I have some other things to accomplish too, so for a couple of hours I can certainly put this in the refrigerator, get other items taken care of, and be on my way. So I will be back in a little bit. Hi friends, I'm back. The dough has been chilling in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, and now you can see, like, it's not drippy. That's the way you want to get it, so that it doesn't flop out of the bowl, it doesn't pour out. So while I start making these, I might in between start putting it back in the refrigerator as I process the cookies. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am now going to take 1 cup of confectionery sugar. And do I need a whole cup? Basically all I'm doing is I am going to be rolling the dough right into this confectionery sugar. So I'm not filling it all the way up, because I can always add more if I need to coat more cookies. So I'll put that there, and I'll try to move this a little bit so you can see a little bit of what I'm doing. So in order to do this, I will be taking this batter. You can use 2 teaspoons, or you can use a cookie thingy-majiggy. And sorry, my terminology is just not there. And you can see as I go in, it's almost like fudge. And does it taste good? I'm not telling. And then you just drop it into the confectionery sugar. I do a couple at a time, kind of make it I just start dropping them in. Make sure your hands are washed, folks, before you start this, because your hands are going to get dirty, possibly. So what I do is I put a couple of drops in there, and I will coat them with the flour. I also use parchment paper. I end up buying it pre-cut. This just makes it easier. You do not need parchment paper. I just want to reiterate that because I used to make these without it before the invention of parchment paper. I've coated that little glob of chocolate yumminess, and I'll be putting it on the parchment paper on the cookie sheet. And it doesn't have to be fully coated. It just get it coated, because it will you'll see some of the chocolate later. And you just keep doing this. And grab a few more drops here. Now, could I make these bigger? Yeah, I could. I don't generally. Not these type things. I just like being able to work it a little bit better when they're small. Then maybe by the time I'm done here, I'll probably want bigger cookies just to get the process done. But these can be refrigerated in terms of, or frozen. So once you're all done baking, or you can just bake what you need and then put the rest in the refrigerator, the dough, so that you can make more later. Okay, the oven is done. So 4 more drops. I'm going to just do a dozen at first. And these, when I started baking these, my husband had never had them before when he was a young boy. So when I started making these, he was like, oh my gosh, these are wonderful. Yeah, when I was younger, I could eat lots of sugar and lots of goodness and still keep my figure. Now, and not so much. But also, I'm more conscious about how my body's responding to things. So that's what it looks like right now. And I'm going to put it into the oven. I always work with 2 cookie sheets. So this is going to cook for 10 to 12 minutes. So what I'll be doing is, as I go about baking this, I will get the next tray set up so that as one comes out, the other goes in. And I will show you what this looks like when it's all done. I think I'm going to do like 6 this time instead of 4, because then I only have to do it one more time and get the tray all set up. And but you will find that these are really quite delightful. I like using teaspoons because it's kind of a sticky dough in a sense. And I've not used the cookie scooper. I had to think of ice cream in my brain to think it's a scooper. My nose is a little bit reacting. I went outside and checked with the chickens because to see if they had any eggs, which they did. They had 3 today, and they're now starting to lay in their own nesting boxes. This is the first day that I've noticed that. Usually they take turns and go into one nesting box. It's like, come on, girls, get your act together. But I went out there, and how I have to go out there now, because if I don't go out with food, they start picking at me. One of them will come along and start nipping at the back of my leg, and I'm not too fond of that. I've had to show her who was the person in charge, but to make it easier for myself, I've learned to just go out with their midday snack. In the morning they get like a oatmeal type dish where I combine oatmeal, herbs, grains, and other stuff for them, flaxseed, everything that is good for them for egg production. And looks like I messed that up a little bit. But in the afternoon, because it's between 10 and 12 or 10 and 1, they start laying eggs. So I don't go out there until after. But in order to not get attacked, I go out there with kale, berries, and some wheat berries and stuff like that, which are things that is really good for them. And the thing that they love the most is kale. I have never seen anything love kale as much as they do. Certainly not going to be having my husband jumping up at me for kale. So this tray is all set to go in when the next one comes out. And I was talking about the chickens. What I found though is when I do that, I throw those things out. And even when I get out there, I've got a couple of them that jump hip high to get whatever I have in the bowl for them. So what I do is I throw out the kale and the seeds, and they go scattering and they fight over kale, which is kind of cool because now they're distracted. And then I'm able to collect their eggs. So today I got 3 eggs, which I'm really thankful for. I used 4 today. So they're actually helping out. So this is what I do, and I will come back and show you that once these are baked, what they look like. They are delectable. They melt in your mouth. Most people, if you give them a tray, will not be able to have just one. That is my problem during the holidays when I bake things that I enjoy. And that's why when I bake for my husband, I make smaller batches now, so that even if they have gluten in them, I'm not tempted, because I've always loved the things I make and the things that I bake. I mean, the new things that I'm making, I'm not too sure about until it happens, but these, you'll see, they're really, really good, and similar to snickerdoodles, except they're chocolate and confectionery sugar versus cinnamon. And snickerdoodles is another favorite of our family. My oldest daughter loves snickerdoodles. Actually, they all love snickerdoodles. And then I found out a couple years back that my younger brother said, hey, I want some of those. So I had to ship some to him to South Carolina. And it took him a while to get to his post office box. But he got them. I just said, you're going to have to heat them up in the microwave or put them in the window so the sun can warm them up. But this is what I enjoy doing this, because I know that as part of Christmas, this is something that I know will be appreciated. You know, throughout the year, you make chocolate chip cookies or all the different baked goods. It's kind of like, oh, this is great, this is a special treat. But during the holidays, when you save some of these specialty items, it just makes the holiday a little bit warmer, a little bit more enjoyable. I'll be back showing you some the finish cookies, and see what they look like. Okay, I'm back. Cookies are coming out, cookies are going in, but the next thing that I'm going to do while I'm baking is I'm preparing a plate to put them on. Now, this is pre-sized, and what I'm doing is, let's see what I want to say, is I want to take a chopstick, and I'll show you what I do so that I can cut this easier. I don't know if I can get that into the picture well enough. So I take it in here, and I just go around and mark it with the chopstick. And then I'm able to take my scissors and go around and cut it. Now I can cut it a little bit larger if I choose, which I'm going to do to kind of give it a little bit of edging. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because quite honestly, the recipients of this delightful dessert they're not going to even notice. I like the idea of using the stick because, the chopstick, because it leaves no pencil marks or anything like this, and I don't have a unit to go right in there. So that fills it up, that fills the plate quite nicely. And so now what I'll do is, these are cool, and I got 2 minutes for one batch to come out and the next one ready to go in. And this way I can start laying out the cookies onto the cooler tray or the box. I would not put them in a box right now because they're still kind of cooling. So I am going to show you. Okay, so these were in there for 10 minutes. So when I break them right now, they've been cooling for about 8 minutes. And you break them up and they're kind of chewy and they're going to be good. And these are gluten-free. They're perfect and they're going to be great, and they taste just as good as if they had gluten flour in it. My timer is going off, so I got to switch. Please be really careful to use hot pads when you're doing this, because burnt hands are not fun. Although if you want to take care of a burn, if you've got aloe plants on it, first of all, put your hands in cold water and then take your aloe plant and just cut a piece off and just slather it all over your hand. Getting impatient because these are really I have to put these away. But one thing that I can't do is bake and not try it. I have to try it to make sure it tastes okay. Now I can use bare hands with this going in because the pan has already been cooled. How do I know it's done? That's one thing that I want to share with you. Is when they come out, you should be able to put your finger in and dent it a little bit, but it won't be sticky at all. So they're done. So these cookies, these are called chocolate crinkles. They are so good. You know, they can come out and they look different. All of them look very different. So that's why they're called chocolate crinkles. They look like cracked pavement and stuff. So I'm going to share the recipe with you. I've shared it a little bit. If you want it gluten-free, substitute the regular flour with your gluten-free flour of choice. So half a cup of your choice of vegetable oil. I used, what did I use? I used grapeseed oil. You can use whatever oil you want. You can use olive oil. I used to use vegetable oil before, but I haven't bought that in quite some time. All right, so half a cup of vegetable oil, 4 squares unsweetened chocolate, 4 ounces, and you want to melt that. 2 cups granulated sugar, and 4 eggs. So as you're melting the chocolate, you want to get the other 4 ingredients, your oil, your sugar, and eggs, and start mixing them together. Add in that, actually add the eggs last after you put the melted chocolate in there, and then add your eggs. On the side, you're going to have 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt. I don't use iodized salt, but you can use table salt. I just prefer to use sea salt. And 2 teaspoons of vanilla. So once your moist items are done, your egg and everything, those mixed in, add your 2 teaspoons of vanilla, mix that in, And then your powdered items that you've mixed together, add those into the mix. And then mix it up really good. Refrigerate for at least 2 hours. And then you have a solid chocolate mixture that you can work with. You can use your spoons to put it on. You can use a cookie scoop. I had to think ice cream scoop again. Or you can use 2 teaspoons, which is what I generally do. Put it through that the sugar, the powdered sugar, which is a cup or more depending on how much you decide. I started out with a cup. I think I'm going to end up with like 1.5 cups with this. It says it's supposed to make, oops, I shut the book. It's supposed to make about 6 dozen. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe it'll make 5. It depends on the size cookies. You bake it 350 for 10 minutes. If it doesn't dent gently, if it's not like a crispy touch, not real crispy like toast, but if you can't, it just should have a soft touch to it. Then it's done. You can take it out. You can keep it in there for 12 minutes. It just makes it a little bit more crispy. It's whatever your taste buds prefer. Let those cookies cool for at least 8 to 10 minutes, and then they'll be ready. They won't be too hot, but you do want them to cool to have the better effect. The longer they cool, the better they are. Although, I don't know, I think they're pretty good right now. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you take the time to make these. These are really good, and it's a nice little special cookie making time with family and stuff. Have the ingredients pulled out. Have your kids measure this stuff with you. Get it all together and start baking. And if you're home alone, like I am today, bake them for some loved ones. Have a great day and Merry Christmas and God bless.